Welcome to Paradigms at paradigms.life, the radio show and podcast that brings you inspiring people with visions of a viable future for life on Earth that includes humans. Hi, I'm Baruch, host of Paradigms. Thanks for tuning in. Glad to be here with you. We have a really interesting episode. We're featuring a brilliant album. So you know what they say about history, if we don't learn from it, we're doomed to repeat it. We see a whole lot of that going on right now on Earth. We are repeating some of our biggest mistakes: war, religious extremism, greed, hatred, violence. These are things humans have been doing for a long time, and we're still doing them. We don't seem to have learned from our experience. Maybe we'll get it this time. Well, my guests on this episode are two people part of a group that created an amazing record that is musically brilliant, but also brings us information about history that we can learn from. And the history this record is dealing with is the history of New Orleans and Louisiana. We'll be talking about why that's so significant when we look at what's happening in the U.S. right now. And the music is just fantastic. I think you're going to love this. So let's meet my guests right now and get on with the show. Chris Butcher and Holly Devon of Sabertooth Swing, welcome to Paradigms.
Thank you for having us.
I've just been listening to your new record, Delta Bound, and really loving it. But before we get to talking about that, I'd love to hear about each of your story a little bit, how you came to be making this music.
I'm originally from Canada. I moved down here in 2017 because of the music. You know, I originally came to study with Delphia Marsalis, one of the great trombone players and producers, and met Romain, our kind of band leader and guitarist. You know, I moved down here to be around the culture and to kind of soak it up and be mentored by people in the scene and play in this oral tradition that gets called jazz around the rest of the world. And, you know, Romain's a creative kind of hub, I would call him, or, you know, so many people know him. And a lot of this was his idea, and he connected me and he connected Holly here. So.
And of course, he is jazz royalty.
Yeah, you're talking about Mr. Delphia Marsalis. Yeah, he without a doubt is. He's an NEA jazz master. He's one of the greatest trombone players of all time. He's played with everyone, you know, a true genius, and kind of being around that has been a great influence. I mean, I really learned on the bandstand. His whole thing was, you know, come to the gigs, come sit in, and you'll, you know, if you're smart, you'll figure it out. And because that's what I would like to stress about the New Orleans scene is it's not really coming out of a university to me. It's got deep roots, and that's through an oral tradition and through mentorship and getting passed down from musician to musician, and, you know, in his history through his family and all the people who worked around them, you know.
Where in Canada are you from?
I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, but I spent 10 years of my life in Toronto, one of the most kind of diverse musical scenes. That's really where I became a professional musician, playing with every type of group you could imagine up there: Jamaican musicians, Persian superstars, Cuban bands, klezmer bands, people playing jazz. I had my own group performing New Orleans brass band music, which I love. My mom's from New Jersey, so, you know, I have that connection to having dual citizenship. And, you know, she grew up in the marching bands in New Jersey, and my grandfather played tuba in the Princeton marching band, and, you know.
Very cool. Holly, what's a little bit of your story?
Well, in a way, I was brought down to New Orleans by the music as well, because I came for Jazz Fest when I was 18. It was the second Jazz Fest after the storm. I remember being just so blown away by just how good I felt to be here. New Orleans is always changing, and the atmosphere and the vibrations are always in flux. And I can still really remember how I felt in that moment. But then I went to college. I thought, because I was young, I thought everything in the world would be this cool. I was like, great, this is, high school's over and everything's going to be amazing from here on out. And I traveled a lot in college, and I saw a lot of really incredible places, but it turns out nowhere is as cool as New Orleans. So I hightailed it down here and haven't left in 10 years.
It really is a special city. And I swear they move the streets at night. So, anything could happen in New Orleans.
Anything can and does.
So Sabertooth Swing, I mean, you all have a really amazing sound. This new record, Delta Bound, is both musically, lyrically, and I want to say politically powerful. So I'm really interested in the inspiration and how this came to be.
Well, so to clarify, I'm not in the band. I am, I guess, the album writer. Romain was making an album, and he and Chris were working closely. Chris obviously played on the album, as well as being a really incredible producer and studio mix master. My part came in when Romain and I are both very similar in our, I think, historical mentality. We're, both non-academics, although I do have a master's in Latin American studies that focused on Caribbean history. But, we really enjoy reading historians, and we're both endlessly curious. Romain's big wish is that his major afterlife wish is that he could be able to just see all of history go by from the very beginning.
Wow.
Yeah. So I more or less agree. I don't know if I have the patience for the whole thing, but I might like to jump around a little bit. So I think he and I were independently asking a lot of the same questions about Louisiana history. And as artists, how do we engage with multiple time frames at once? I think that there's something inherent to art that's really well equipped to ask questions about time that other mediums just can't. I think particularly right now, my artistic sensibilities are very attracted to exploring multiple timescapes, and so that's something. I have a print publication called The Iron Lattice that we've been sort of asking those questions together as publishers. So when I first heard Romain's album, I understood very quickly that he was doing something special, and that no one else was really doing, to be able to say, okay, here's a traditional art form, so let's play it, and be self-aware that every time we play a traditional song, we're time traveling, we're helping other people go back in time in certain ways, but we're also very much in this moment. So to play a traditional jazz song, you have a foot in each reality. And so Romain took that as a baseline and then took it way farther, bringing in all these different elements. So when I first heard it, it was a very rough version of what it is now. And then he and I started collaborating. I'm, a writer and an editor, so I was able to provide, I think, a degree of structure and sort of a meta vision that I think was helpful for him. And because the first time I heard it was 3 days before lockdown, it ended up being our pandemic project, and was one of the most meaningful parts of that time for me, that he and I would be able to get together and, eat dinner and, talk and explore these ideas. And it was just so fulfilling creatively. When you're making art, you're so focused on the process. And so I was just so satisfied by the process. I didn't even think about really anybody listening to it.
You're listening to my conversation with Chris Butcher and Holly Devon, who both are part of the group Sabertooth Swing. Chris is a trombonist and a wonderful recording engineer and just a really talented musical guy. And Holly is a writer and a thinker and a philosopher. And, well, you got the picture. You heard the first part of the conversation. We're going to listen to some music now from Sabertooth Swing's new record, Delta Bound, and then we'll be back with more of this conversation. We're going to start out with the first two tracks on the album. The first one is a short spoken word piece by Holly Devon, and then we'll get into the music. You're listening to Paradigms at paradigms.life.
Historical production in the West is almost exclusively a written affair. History books are compiled from archives whose endless sheaves of papers are generally produced by institutions and figures of authority. The truth suffers many casualties in the process. History as we know it typically explains itself by way of the actions of great men and their consequences, in part as a way to find coherence out of chaos. But men of action rarely leave behind much indication of what was felt by those around them as they marched and bayoneted their way through time. Their stories are trapped between the bounds of cause and effect. Music, on the other hand, knows no such limitations. Its creation is always marked by the moment and place in which it was made, but songs move more freely in time. As a music tradition travels and evolves, its texture is the sum of all it has been before. A drum beat comes from West Africa to the Caribbean, where it is combined with instruments from Spain and used to describe a life very different from anything experienced on either continent. Living testimonials, these melodies allow their listeners to perceive history through the senses instead of the mind.
No blues around. I'm tired of roaming, that's why I'm homing. I'm Delta bound. When nighttime's falling, my Delta's calling. Keep on calling, I'll soon be around. I'm on my way now, most any day now. I'm Delta bound. Every time I close my eyes, I seem to see Louisiana. I can hear them folks down there singing in their free and easy manner. I've been a rover, now that's all over. Knee-deep in clover is where I'll be found. I'm on my way now, most any day now. I'm Delta bound. Every time I close my eyes, I seem to see Louisiana. I can hear them folks down there singing in their strange and peculiar manner. I've been a rover, now that's all over. Knee deep in clover is where I'll be found. I'm on my way now, more almost any day now. I'm Delta bound.
You just heard Delta Bound, the title track from the new record by Sabertooth Swing. We started that out with a little spoken word piece by Holly Devon. And now back to my conversation with Chris Butcher and Holly Devon, talking about this amazing new record, Delta Bound by Sabertooth Swing. Chris, what would you like to tell us about the inspiration, the project?
And I think it's a beautiful project, and I think it's diversity of songs and performances and style. Obviously we're a New Orleans based and usually pigeonholed into the word traditional jazz, which I don't particularly like either of those words, to be honest. But, I would prefer to call it New Orleans music. And, I really love how there's Delta blues in it, how there's a Jamaican tinge, there's a Caribbean tinge, there's all these elements, there's all the beautiful poetry and political activism and Creole French and accordion and normal French and Zydeco and all these elements, which it's like there's so many trad jazz bands in New Orleans that play this kind of classical repertoire and this whatever it is, this specific LP of Preservation Halls from whenever this. And I'm so glad to have Holly here and to have pointed us kind of in a broader direction on it. And I think it really comes across on the album, and particularly if you judge it for its strengths, for what it's doing. And that is, I believe, this story that we've told across it.
Yeah, to jump in on that, I think that Chris is making a really good point about the traditional songs and the repertoire. And it can be frustrating to see New Orleans culture pigeonholed and, packaged and sold by the Tourist Commission. And, there are these ways that people think that they already know what New Orleans is. But as we've discussed, it's such a rich, dynamic, ever-shifting place that, none of those categories really do it justice. So to make an album that defies all categorization is so exciting, and it feels really true to the city. It feels like, as someone, who's not from here, but is extremely spiritually beholden to New Orleans at this point, it feels really healthy to be telling stories in that way and to say, as Chris pointed out, we have so many elements from Louisiana culture, which normally are not necessarily in conversation with one another. Zydeco albums are Zydeco albums, jazz albums are jazz albums, right? But to be able, and this is Romain's genius, is that he is able to see the connections between people and things. For him, art is really about bringing all these elements together, and he does it so beautifully. And he's such a lovely spirit that no one can really say no to him. So, even if did he know Jeffery Broussard going into it? I don't think so. I think he just said, "Hey, do you want to be on my experimental history album?" And Jeffery Broussard said, "Okay." And then they had this wonderful recording session. I didn't get to be there, but I heard about it. And, Romain's eyes were basically filled with tears afterwards and just so grateful. And, and Chris can probably speak to those recording moments that, it was all just so vulnerable and rich. And it feels like there is a calling of the spirit that this, has given us an opportunity to do. And I think spirit-based work is, ultimately what's most fruitful for the world right now. And that's, it's difficult to intellectualize that.
You're listening to my conversation with Holly Devon and Chris Butcher of Sabertooth Swing. And just a shout out to Romain, the founder of the band and band leader and visionary. So sorry you couldn't be on the interview, but absolutely blown away by your work. Now we're going to hear some more music from Delta Bound, and then we'll be back with more conversation. We're going to start out with Buddy Bolden's Blues from the new record Delta Bound by Sabertooth Swing.
I thought I heard Buddy Bolden say, "You're nasty but you're dirty, take it away. You're awful and you're terrible, take it away." I thought I heard him say, I thought I heard Buddy Bolden shout, "Open up that window and let that bad air out. Open up that window and let that foul air out." I thought I heard him say. He said give him 40 days in the parish jail without no bail. He said give him a broom to sweep with and throw away the key. You know I heard him say them low down mean old words to me. I thought I heard Buddy Bolden shout. He said give me the money you owe me or I'm gonna put you out. He said give me what you owe me before I punch you out. Yes, I thought I heard him say.
That was Sweet Lorna from the new record Delta Bound by Sabertooth Swing. Before that, we heard Buddy Bolden's Blues. How do you like what you're hearing? We'd love to see your comments. How do you like the music? What do you think about this project? Please consider subscribing to this podcast. That way you'll be notified whenever there's a new one. Now we're going to continue on with my conversation with Chris Butcher and Holly Devon. This is Paradigms at paradigms.life. The stories of Louisiana are sort of symbolically, quintessentially the American stories, of wealth and poverty, of massive injustice, and of striving for justice, and I could go on and on. And so the timing is really perfect, and the pieces of learning that come through here very much speak to what we're experiencing politically now, without hitting people over the head with it. It's not pedantic, it's not didactic, but we're in some, I don't even know what word to use, interesting times, right? And you all live in a city that embodies so much of that.
Yeah, we kind of, that's New Orleans, is you take the good with the bad and you find joy in pain and you just keep on rolling because it certainly, you go to a jazz funeral, you go to a second line. That's what the city is. Improvisation. I mean, you look at the music and they created this all out of, how can we kind of get by? How can, that's to me what Black American music is taking what you have and making something beautiful out of it. And, I think that's kind of the story of this album and what we're doing right now. Apparently there's a Chinese proverb of may you be born into interesting times. And well,
here we are. Yeah. But you're right. African Americans in this country, for instance, soul food, was the stuff that the plantation owners didn't want to eat. Collards grew in the ditches. Now it's its own cuisine and it's celebrated. And I think a lot of people don't know these things. So the fact that this record is here offering this information with this music, it's really brilliant.
I mean, I think that we're talking about creation as spiritual survival. And I think that, and material as well. But I think that that's something, and you're talking about these American issues. And another thing I really love about New Orleans forces you to broaden your scope of what is America. It's because it's a crossroads of many Americas. And, the United States in many ways is an antagonistic force in Louisiana. And you can see that. And when I say the United States, I'm referring to the government and, the American plantation and racial system. And if you look at the ways that New Orleans has resisted assimilation into that, culture is on the front lines of that battle. So when, it's natural to be attracted to that culture. And I think a lot of the tensions of living in New Orleans as a transplant are, on one hand, that's not your tradition, but on the other hand, you're attracted to it for a reason and you might have something to contribute. So I think successfully participating is about being aware of what's at stake and how that culture was formed and how it's still functioning in much the same way because those antagonisms haven't left and, those struggles are ongoing. And I'm so grateful to live in a city where the conversation around resistance is so rich and so informed by ancestral memory and so fun, and to be able to say celebration is resistance and celebration is power and transcending, your material circumstances is a possibility for this community here, then, to me, I think that there are many roads that this opens up into a future where I think we can all behave more consciously and, responsibly.
That's the dream.
The dream.
Keep on dreaming.
You all have made this amazing thing, and it's a concept album. So I don't know, are you going to be able to take this on the road? Is this maybe in parts? Is everyone who's on the album going to be up for traveling with this? What happens next?
Well, we had a beautiful CD release in conjunction with Holly. And that was amazing. And we had Sister Helen Prejean out there. Sister Helen, did her reading, and we had Daiquiri who did his harp piece with poetry, and we had the band play a lot of the tunes and some other tunes. And yeah, but I mean, we're kind of at the crux now of this is, it was very much a studio, big collaboration of all these artists in the form of the compact laser disc, and its packaging and the story within that. And we're hoping to spread it that way. Romain's in France at the moment. Our trumpet player singer is in San Diego. So, we're kind of at that point of 2.5 years into this pandemic. And, Holly pointed out that it was a great pandemic project to get this out. We would hope to be able to take this to festivals and maybe to international places and to the States. If you know any people out in New Mexico way, yeah, we would kind of love to get it out there. But it's, given the circumstances, I feel it came to fruition with the album, And
it's true. The release was really incredible because we were able to recreate a lot of the album, with a huge swath of our community. I mean, it was a lot of people mentioned that night about how many different types of New Orleanians came together and how joyous it was. And it just felt like this really special cross-section of the city we love. And, we had Queen Kim with the original Wild Tchoupitoulas, who suited up, came down, just blew the roof off. And the roof in question it's called the Mudlark Theater, which is this really unbelievable, quirky puppet theater in the 8th Ward. And the woman who runs it is really generous and magical and interesting. And, so she was delighted. And, you could see kind of her strange puppets sort of lurking in the shadows, but somehow they worked really well. And then, we had Jeremy, who played trumpet, and he also did the Sidney Bechet piece about Congo Square. And he did such a beautiful job and, really called the ancestors. So the spirit was very strong in that room. We did a joint release of the latest issue of The Iron Lattice, which is really very similar to the album. It explores a lot of those same themes. So it felt really good to me to be able to bring all of my creative interests together. And I think with an event like that, with an album like that, sometimes you just kind of have to let it lead and follow. I'm so delighted to be speaking with you today. It's a total surprise. Now I get to know about your fabulous podcast. And I feel like these doors just open, as they're supposed to. One of my favorite writers is Elena Ferrante, the Italian writer. And when she talks about her choice to not use her given name, to use a pen name, she says that for her to follow her books around and to make it about her would be like following her children off to college. And that, it's time that they make their own way in the world. And she doesn't want to tell people what to think about it or what, it's your book now. So I think there's a little element of that. There's a little bit of the book magic to this album, and that, we've raised it well. We gave it all the tools it needs. And now I think it's going to go into the world and make magic of its own.
I hope you're finding this conversation interesting, and the music is so fantastic. I hope you're enjoying it. We're going to listen to a couple more tracks, one music and one spoken word, and then we'll be back with the final part of my conversation with Chris Butcher and Holly Devon. We're going to start out with Send Me to the Electric Chair, and then we're going to hear a spoken word piece from Sister Helen Prejean. Here's music from Sabertooth Swing.
I said, Judge, Your Honor, hear my plea before you open up your court. Oh, I don't crave no sympathy for what I have to report. I caught her with a gambling Joe that I had warned her about once before. I pulled my knife and I went insane. The rest you already know. I said, Judge, Judge, hear me, Judge, won't you send me to the electric chair? I said, Judge, Judge, listen to me, Judge, you can burn me, 'cause I don't care. I wanna take a trip to the devil down below. I sliced up my sweet patootie, I got to reap just what I sow. I said, Judge, Judge, hear me, Judge, won't you send me to the electric chair? Won't you send me to the electric chair? I said, listen real closely. I know you'll understand, Judge, that I love that gal so dear. But first I sliced her with my barlow, then I kicked her in the side, then I stood all laughing while she laid down and died. So I said, Judge, listen to me one more time, won't you send me to the electric chair? Won't you hear me, Judge? I said, send me to the electric chair. I said, Judge, you know I've been thinking about it, Judge. It's time that I get on out of here. I don't want no bondsman to throw up my bail. I don't want to spend no 99 years stuck in your stinking jail. So, Judge, Judge, listen to me, Judge, won't you send me to the electric chair?
On January 1st, 1997, I wrote the following letter to Pope John Paul II. Dear Holy Father, thank you for raising your voice on behalf of Virginia death row inmate Joseph Odell. Joseph Odell is alive, though still in grievous trauma from his ordeal. He cannot control his tears. They tried to kill me, he keeps saying. Awaiting his turn to die, he watched two others, one a close friend, be taken to their deaths. Conscious human beings anticipate death and die 1,000 times before they die, no matter what the, in quotes, humane method of death may be, even lethal injection, which is supposed to just put you to sleep. Interestingly, the lone dissent in the Supreme Court decision to hear the Odell case came from Catholic Justice Antonin Scalia, who is relentless in his pursuit of legalizing executions, even of juveniles and the mentally challenged. He seems to have no trouble squaring executions with his Catholic faith, and in this he is no exception. Rarely is the death penalty questioned from pulpits at Mass, and pro-life, as it turns out, most often means innocent life, not guilty life. The death penalty is very much a poor person's issue. 99% of the 3,100 souls on death row are poor. And I have found that as a general rule, those involved with justice for poor people readily oppose the death penalty, whereas those separated from poor people in their struggles readily support it. They are more prone to see poor people as the enemy and to be willing to inflict harsh punishments to control them. Your words on the death penalty and Evangelium Vitae have come as a fresh breeze. Especially welcome were your words upholding the dignity of human life, the sacred and inviolable character that each human life possesses. Unfortunately, however, when you uphold the state's right to execute in cases of absolute necessity, some pro-death penalty advocates, such as Catholic District Attorney of New Orleans, Harry Connick Sr., use those words to justify their vigorous pursuit of the death penalty. As the death penalty is practiced now, Mr. Connick has stated, the death penalty is all too rare. So he feels that every death penalty that he succeeds in getting is, quote, an absolute necessity. Even in a so-called developed country such as the U.S., we're discovering how much the status of the victim plays a part in the decision to seek death as a punishment. The vast majority of people on death row, 85%, are chosen for death because they killed white people. Whereas when people of color are killed, fully 50% of all homicides, not only is the death penalty seldom sought, but often there's not even vigorous prosecution of such cases. But I'm full of hope. I have found that when people can get real information about the death penalty, not just rhetoric from politicians or sound bites from media, overwhelmingly, they reject the death penalty and choose life.
The death penalty is controversial. It's been banned in most countries. We still have it in the U.S., and in fact, they are looking into bringing back more barbaric forms of the death penalty here in the U.S., firing squad and hanging. Whatever your views are about the death penalty, that letter from Sister Helen Prejean certainly is powerful. Before that, we heard Old Song, Send Me to the Electric Chair. It's a song, but it speaks to actual people's experience. Again, if we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. All right, here's the final part of my conversation with Holly Devon and Chris Butcher from the band Sabertooth Swing. This is such a great piece of work. We've talked about it, the timeliness of it, the spirit of it, the depth of it, the meaning, and I'm so grateful for it. I've listened to it a couple of times, and it's really good food for right now. It's nourishing for right now.
That's really nice to hear. Yeah, it's really exciting. The more you think about it, the more you can get from it, and not just in terms of the album itself. For me as a creator, I'm really excited. You know, I'm a writer, but I consider myself an artist, and I'm really interested in collaboration. I'm really interested in how do we push our art forms forward when we've played out a lot of the more avant-garde options. You know, we're at a time when everything weird has been tried, probably. So, you know, what does it mean to do something new? The first thought I had when I heard what Romain was doing was, wow, this is one of the only fresh experimental ideas I've heard in a long time, because the experiment is not making strange sounds, which, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's a lot of really exciting possibilities there too. But the experiment is, how do we engage our senses differently? How do we conceptualize reality differently? How do we travel through time differently? You know, those experiments are pretty meaty, and it's courageous to step up to the bat to do that kind of work.
And listening to you say that makes me feel like, wow, maybe we really are on the cusp of that quantum leap that humanity needs to make to survive.
From your lips, you know, but I think that what this album means to me, and what my friendship with Romain and, you know, now Chris and all of the people that I've been able to connect to through the album is that we all want that. There's so much love here in this city, and there's so much love in this music. And as Martin Luther King called it, it's strong love, and strong love is justice. And in order to dig in to say, and that's my relationship to New Orleans. Like, I love this city more than I love my own life. And, that is a really exciting relationship. New Orleans is, the love of my life in many ways. And what that means is that it's a relationship that makes me grow, that makes me be my best self, because this city doesn't really, I don't feel like I can get away with much here. You have to kind of come out swinging, and that's what this album is that, and Romain is a very good vessel for that. I think it's kind of fun that he's not here in a way, because we can just kind of like paint this.
He'll get a kick out of listening to this.
He's such a sweetheart, and he's brilliant, but his genius is very egoless, and that's what's so also innovative and exciting. To have someone that's like, I have a brilliant creative vision, and it's everyone else's creative vision. That he was saying, my vision is that I can see how wonderful you all are. And bringing me on, the set. Basically, what happened was I'm a very honest person, and when you ask for my feedback, I give it to you. And so he said, listen to my album and tell me what you think. And what I said was, I think this is incredible, and it needs to completely be restructured. And he's like, all right, you're hired. I'm like, what? And,
So you are the one responsible for this, the way this flows.
I won't take full responsibility, but yes, I think that what, he was doing it in a way, he was doing it in a linear historical, thank you. And my innovation, I guess, was to say, I think you can break up with linear time because you've already done it. This album is not a linear time vessel. So let's go deep. And so that was a lot of our conversations. How do we organize this? How do we create something more circular? Where's the flow? And what's the spatial relationship between these songs and these ideas? And so it started getting a lot more texture after those questions were asked. But ultimately, I didn't know, I had a party a few months ago, and, he said something like, oh, you're a co-producer on the album. I'm like, what do you mean? I thought we were just talking and hanging out, and, you recorded my voice, and and then I realized that, what's so lovely is that, he didn't feel threatened. He never wanted to, there's nothing about his vision that he had to protect, that everyone's magic and ideas were welcome, and that he knew that it would make it stronger and stronger and stronger. And really, at a certain point, when he did have to kind of cut him off, as Chris can probably testify, he's like, well, we don't have any Creole, so we don't have any. It's like, all right, we got an album.
When we started this, it was kind of, we started recording a couple tunes, and we have albums in the past that are couple kind of tunes that are, some are tongue-in-cheek, some aren't, so and when we started this, it was like, okay, some of these sessions are 3.5 years ago, I think. And it didn't make sense to me when it's like, okay, we're doing a Zydeco session. Okay, well, this guy's, Jeffrey's amazing. It's beautiful. This is, we just need, we need this. And it kind of, to be honest, it didn't make sense to me until we were doing the final mixes. Because which song from which session, and what we need, we actually just need this Ngonian African percussion on this tune, and we're trying to do a soundscape of this, and I'm like, what are we doing here? Going on? Like, it wasn't until it was like, we're setting this up to get mastered, and okay, what's the order? Oh, okay. Like, yeah, it would make sense to put the Helen Prejean directly after Electric Chair, and it would make sense to end with Nuages. And, it was all these kind of it was all these pieces that really kind of, that puzzle, I feel, clicked just kind of in the final stages.
Chris and I are really complementary in that, like for me, the big picture is all that I saw from the beginning.
Yeah. I was the exact opposite of just seeing the, recording these tunes or editing these takes and mixing them. I did the first track, which was a piece that I had written for my magazine, The Iron Lattice. And I'd never been recorded before. And it was maybe like first day of lockdown. And that was when I met Chris. And, I have to say that, Chris
holds a very special space in his recording studio. And there's a way that I can see that he doesn't need to know the whole picture to know exactly what to do in the moment. And there's a real comfort and safety in the way that he records. And so, I think that, Chris's special sauce is, very present in every moment of it. And to see how well every recording came out, Chris's musicianship is incredible, and also has that gift of being able to see what other people need to bring to the table, not make anyone nervous, make everyone feel, like the warmth of a summer day to just, relax and bring your best self. So it was delightful for me to also just watch that creative process. And I know that the album would not have been as strong, if he hadn't been there every step of the way.
And you make a really interesting point, which is that in a group venture, you need people who are holding the overview, and you need people who are right down on the ground paying attention to every little bit. And that combination is what can give you this dimensionality and this quality of both detail and overarching vision. Thank you both so much for talking with me. And please tell Romain, I'm sorry he wasn't able to be here. And I applaud his vision and all of your vision. And as soon as I saw this, I knew I had to talk with anyone involved with it that I could talk with. And so I'm really appreciative of your time and energy and spirit and what you've put into this.
Thank you so much. Well, I hope to see you down in New Orleans soon.
Come back soon, Baruch.
Chris Butcher, Holly Devon, thank you so much for being on the show and talking with me about this new record, Delta Bound, from the band Sabertooth Swing. The historical context of all this music and these spoken word pieces, so powerful, but also the discussion about the creative process, about how this came together over a period of years, hopefully is encouraging to others who have creative visions, who have projects that maybe take a long time to come to fruition, maybe don't, but you don't give up. You keep working on it. And many thanks to all the people who made this record possible, and especially Romain, who was the impetus behind the whole thing. So thank you very much, Chris and Holly. And folks, if you'd like to know more about this band, more about this record, which I strongly encourage, check out their website. It's sabertoothswing.org, sabertoothswing.org. Check out the website. They have a YouTube channel with videos you can check out. Really, this is a wonderful musical exploration. And if you enjoyed this episode of Paradigms, I hope you'll check out our archive at the Paradigms website, paradigms.life, and in iTunes and wherever else you find your podcasts, which now includes YouTube. Paradigms has a YouTube channel, and we're putting our episodes up as videos. Check that out. Paradigms Podcast on YouTube. Paradigms has a Patreon campaign going to help pay the bills, and we appreciate our Patreon supporters so much. Thank you. You can check out our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/paradigms. It's been quite a week. Terrible fires in Arizona and New Mexico. One of the oldest pueblos in New Mexico burned this week. There are people displaced, animals displaced. If you can help, please do. War continues in Eastern Europe and here in the United States. Religious extremists are seeking to impose their will on the rest of the country, even though they're a minority, through a Supreme Court that has compromised its legitimacy through 3 political appointments that were forced through against protocol. If we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. Let's learn from our history so we don't have to keep repeating it. And so instead of a word for the week, let's just do a little thing where we really pay attention and see if we are, in our own lives, not learning from our past, and change that. Are there things we do in our lives that we don't need to keep doing? Something to think about. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next time with more inspiring people. Until then, Baruch signing off for Paradigms. Be well.
We're a very young country, and violence has worked for us in the past. It began with the settling of this continent and the genocide against Native Americans, then continued when we brought slaves over. Now we tend to blame the poor and see them as a criminal element and use coercion and violence to control them. It's part of a cultural understanding that says the only way to subdue evil is with violence. But it's not part of human nature. Look at all the countries in the world that don't have the death penalty. To some extent, violence is part of our nature, but compassion is too. Seeking justice for everybody is also part of human nature. The death penalty is the most important civil rights issue of our time. It's a politically symbolic issue because it says that the way we're going to solve social problems is by violence. It says that some among us are such a danger to who we are and what we stand for that they must be eliminated. To arrive at this mindset, human beings have to flip a moral switch inside that says the other is not human like us, and so we can do whatever we want to them. And of course, the execution must be removed from the public eye. The chamber is behind prison walls, and we don't see or hear what goes on inside it.
You've been listening to Paradigms at paradigms.life.